Hey guys, and welcome to another video from the Random Watch Dude, and today I'm going to be making a video about quartz watches. So as you can see here, and if you look closely enough, you'll see that both of these watches are quartz watches. They're both ticking away there. They're both actually 36.5mm diameter watches. One, as you can see, this one on the left here is an Omega Seamaster. Now I've done pretty much a full review of this watch, by the way, in the past, over the last, I think it's about a month ago. So I'll leave a link to that video in this video so that you can have a look at that in more detail. But this is a quartz Seamaster, as you can see, from roughly 2008. I've had this one in the collection for the last 3 or 4 years. And beautiful watch, really fantastic travel watch, this one in particular. It's got the jumping hour hand as well, which makes it really easy if you're traveling to change time zones without any trouble at all. It's actually easier than even a GMT watch, by the way, the jumping hour hand. I find it far more practical than using a GMT complication. So I had this watch, like I say, for about 3 or 4 years, changed the battery on it about 3 or 4 months ago, and I believe the battery on that one, if I recall, it had just been changed when I bought it. So the battery on this one lasts 3 or 4 years. This watch is in particularly good condition. As you can see, just in the bottom there, it's still got the little engraved globe that Omega put on there. It kind of helps, I guess, it helps reduce the likelihood of somebody being able to fake this watch, because that engraved globe is quite difficult to get right. Also, these globes get polished out quite quickly after a service, which tells me that this particular watch, I'll see if I can get a bit closer to it for you there. There you go. Yeah, that globe's quite difficult to fake, if you like. So these globes tend to get polished out very quickly during a service. So this watch is in still pretty much original polished condition. So very nice. And the other watch that I have here, this is a more recent acquisition. I picked this one up a couple of months ago. So this is a TAG Heuer quartz, again, TAG Heuer 1000. Now the Seamaster, which is in fantastic condition for a 2008 model, is good, but this one I picked up, this is in even better condition, I think, and this one's significantly older. So this watch is 35 years old, and it still has the original two-tone bracelet as well. It's in fantastic condition. I picked this up quite recently from Japan, from one of my trusted sellers on Chrono24, and yeah, it's in great condition. Now I've just actually got this back from a quick service. Although there was nothing actually wrong with it, I got the battery changed on it because it wasn't entirely clear to me how long the battery had left to go. So I got the battery changed on it anyway by an authorized well, actually it was an authorized TAG Heuer and Omega service agent, so that was fairly inexpensive, only cost me a couple of $100, and I got a new battery as well as all new seals. So this watch is all good to go now. It's got new crown seals, new crystal seal, new back case seal, and they didn't polish it. I asked them, to just leave it as it is. It's completely unpolished. So yeah, really happy with the condition of this watch as well. So anyway, guys, what I'm saying is I've got two really nice, I guess what you would call either vintage or neo-vintage quartz watches here. Here they are together. Look, see if I can get you a decent view of them together. So the tag is 37mm, and this Omega is 36.5. So they wear very similarly. The Omega, by the way, just holding both of these in my hands now, the Omega is a considerable amount heavier than the tag. That's not to say that the tag is a lightweight. It's got a nice weight to it, but I think it's mostly the bracelet. So the bracelets are quite different here, as well as the clasps. The clasp on the Omega is quite heavy. It's got that lovely old Omega clasp that I like. The TAG Heuer clasp is more kind of pressed and stamped. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a perfectly serviceable clasp. As you can see, it's the old pressed the pressed. Here we go. Let me just see if I can pop this open. Let me just put the Omega down, and I'll just pop this open so that you can see this pressed part here as well. There you go. So there's a diver's extension that's also just pressed, but it's in beautiful condition, and it's perfectly serviceable, guys. There's nothing wrong with this at all. It's got a nice click to it as well. still after 35 years. So very, very happy with both of these watches. This one in particular, this one really sings to me, if I'm honest with you. You get those watches that just talk to you, and the Omega talks to me for lots of different reasons, mainly because it's just such a pretty watch, and it's also got that Bond link, James Bond link, which I like as a Bondophile. But this watch actually really sings to me, and I think it's because it kind of brings back a lot of nostalgia. As a guy that was growing up in my teens during the late 80s and early 90s, I saw this watch a lot. And it's quite nostalgic. I could never afford one of these when they were kind of in vogue and new in 1989. I could never have dreamt of affording one of these. And so there's some nostalgia attached, I think, to owning this watch in particular. But what I wanted to do, guys, was talk about quartz generally, and just try and understand, if I may, with you, why is quartz no longer a kind of a popular movement among us watch enthusiasts? Because there are some great advantages to quartz, of course. One being that they're cheaper to buy. I mean, quartz movements are a lot cheaper than automatic movements for the watch manufacturer. So surely the quartz movements are considerably cheaper to put into a watch, and therefore the actual retail price of a brand new quartz is significantly less. The second one is they're much easier to service. I mean, like I say, I've just basically had this tag fully serviced, new battery, new seals. They gave it a tiny, I think with some of the gold links here, they just put a little bit of brasso in there, just rubbed in, because some of the plating here are tarnished very slightly, and they've just brought that back to looking very nice and new. I paid 195 New Zealand dollars to have that work done, whereas if this was an automatic, I dread to think what it would have cost me, maybe over 1,000, 5, 6, 7 times more service costs. So there's the cost side of it. The accuracy side of it with quartz is, there's no question that a quartz watch is accurate. You're never going to get an automatic watch that's as accurate as any quartz. There's absolutely no argument about that, is there? I mean, this quartz keeps time to within a second, let's say a month, whereas even the best models that Rolex make, that Patek Philippe make, and anybody, all the high horology brands, they can't promise you within a second, a month, can they? So, you get an accuracy with a quartz that you just don't get with the automatic. And the other side of it is, and this is possibly up for debate, arguably, a quartz movement will last longer than an automatic movement, because obviously with a quartz movement, they're pretty much sealed and done in the factory, and you never need to open them up and replace any parts, just the battery, whereas with an automatic movement, the parts do wear out. The Omega coaxials last a little bit longer, of course, because there's less friction in there, but they still will wear out in the end. So the quartz movement in these watches are both completely pretty much sealed movements. They're never going to be replaced, and they're still ticking away beautifully, like they did on the day that they came out of the AD. So so I wanted to answer this question, if I could, as just a watch enthusiast, and also I am an automatic enthusiast, of course. I obsess over automatic watches. I obsess over accuracy. I obsess over power reserve, but also I'm not too snobby to pick up a nice quartz watch and enjoy it, and actually get a little bit nerdy over the specs of the quartz as well. So what is the answer to this? Why are quartz watches pretty much out of fashion, out of vogue, and also to a degree maybe sneered upon by most of us watch enthusiasts? And look, I think there's a very simple answer to it, guys, and I'm just going to answer it pretty much, from the heart, because I think that's where the answer comes from. Is with quartz watches, there's something about a quartz. Now, let me put this in perspective. You put this quartz watch down, and I could put this away in the safe or in the watch box, and I could forget about it, and I could come back to it in 3 months' time, literally 3 months' time, and it will still be ticking, and it will still tell me what the date is. So this quartz watch will keep ticking whether I'm wearing it or not. Now, the difference, of course, with an automatic watch is that it's very, very reliant upon the wearer. So if this watch was an automatic and I put it down 3 months later, I'd probably be worried about the oils having seized up, and I'd probably be worried about wearing it, you know, a considerable amount without giving it a wind and checking it for a day or so, because automatic watches are very organic products, aren't they? You know, they're full of moving parts, mechanical parts and oils, and of course, you know, you've got to, especially if it's a manual wind, you've got to keep it wound. And of course, what happens with even the best automatic watches is that after 3 or 4 days of you not wearing it, in most cases, the watch is literally going to stop. So there's something, and if I may use the word symbiotic, there's a symbiotic relationship between an automatic movement watch and its wearer, whereas, you know, with a quartz watch there is no symbiosis there. The quartz, it's going to keep ticking, you know, whether you're there or not. And of course, the other side of it is if you want to geek out on movements, you know, you're just going to be able to go nuts, aren't you, with automatic movements on watches. You know, you've got, for example, you know, you can geek out on the number of jewels, the power reserve, the silicon hairspring, the full balance bridge, the coaxial escapement, the parachrom hairspring, whereas this is just an ETA quartz, you know, and that's all you need to know. So the relationship between the owner and the automatic watch is symbiotic, and there's an awful lot more geekiness attached and nerdiness attached with the specs on automatics, despite all the drawbacks and the perceived advantages that I think quartz has. I'd almost go as far as to say, if you wanted to use some kind of analogy, let's use analogies because we all like a good analogy. Is an automatic watch is like your loyal dog. You know, the dog can't survive without you. It obeys your every command, and when you're not there, it just sits in the corner and sulks. Whereas the quartz watch is the cat of the movement industry, isn't it? The cat doesn't care whether you're there or not. If you suddenly stop feeding the cat, well, the cat's just going to go somewhere else and get fed. It will keep ticking. And that's kind of what a quartz watch is like, really, isn't it? It doesn't need you wearing it in order to function, whereas the automatic watch does. You know, so there you go, guys. I think that's why quartz movements have sort of become less fashionable. You know, there may be an argument as well that the watch companies, the watch manufacturers wanted to differentiate themselves, potentially, you know, by coming up with their own mechanical movements, because I think the quartz movement industry is pretty much dominated by one player, and that's Swatch. You know, they make a considerable amount of quartz movements, as well as Seiko, of course, and nobody makes a better watch quartz movement, in my view. Nobody makes a better quartz movement than Grand Seiko. They make some phenomenal quartz movements, but both of these, I believe, are running off an ETA, which is obviously now owned by Swatch. So, you know, potentially some of the companies that were relying on Swatch to supply their quartz movements realised the only way they could keep going was to devise their own mechanical movements. Maybe there's an aspect to that, but I think more than anything, guys, it's just the relationship that we have with automatic watches, I think, is far more symbiotic than it is with a quartz. Having said that, I'm going to finish this video where I started with, look at these two fantastic quartz watches. I think they're great, and I think any serious watch collector needs to have some decent quartzes, if that's a word, quartzes, the plural of quartz, in their collection. So, and these two are going to stay in my collection for a very long time, I'm sure. So that's the end of this video, guys. I'd like to pose that question to you guys as well, if you'd like to leave your answers in the comments. You know, what do you think is the difference between quartz and auto, and why is quartz still not the king of the watch movement industry when all the advantages are very, very clear? Let me know what you think in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Cheers, guys.